All right. So here are our two speakers for today. There's Alexandra, or she goes by Lexi Burbey, okay? And she's going to talk about her experience going from Berkeley to being a female venture capitalist. And then the other speaker is Xiaowan. She's right here, and she is with Iconic Growth, and she is going to talk about her journey. But guess what? Where are both of them from? Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Go Bears!
All right, so they're going to tell you about how they got there. And what's freaking amazing is less than 10% of venture capitalists are women. And remember when Bailey, who is the founder of Perimeter, came, and she said, you know, it's so hard being a female founder, and then most of the investors are men. And so it's really exciting to see about 2 of our Berkeley students actually make that 10%, and they're going to tell you about it. So who wants to be a VC here? You can raise your hands higher. All right, so that's it. Before they get started, I just want to talk to you about one thing. So you know these dinners that we're having? I haven't been very clear on the policy other than you can only sign up for one. So let me tell you more. Is the dinners with the speakers, the reason that I want to do this is in the past, we would take the speakers out to dinner as sort of a thank you for coming here as dinner time. But like this year, I wanted to allow more students to go rather than just, 2 or 3 students, have like more students. And that's why we have these pizza dinners. And it gives you a chance to network, but it also is a chance to thank them. But what happened this semester is that in the past, there was a budget of $5,000 given to this class. And now they're trying to support more change maker classes. So we only got $1,000. And instead of going to a nice fancy dinner, sorry guys, we're having pizza dinner so more of you can meet with them. And so that budget pretty much covers 4 pizza dinners. And this is our second one tonight. So the other ones are really ad hoc, and like there may be one next week, but because we don't have the budget, it's paid for by either myself the last couple times when it wasn't a pizza meal, or by Victoria next week. So there is no formal dinner every single night with the speakers. There's going to be 4 formal ones. And then that's the one where I actually send out a link to you guys and you can try and sign up. Does that make sense? So I know it's been fuzzy for a lot of people. So now, who wants to go to dinner tonight? Okay, this is the list of students who are going to dinner tonight. And what you're going to do is after class, you want to head over to SCET, which is in the stadium. It's not in Sutarja Dai Hall, so please don't go there. Okay? And then you'll have pizza and you get to talk with our speakers. And the people who are going should have also gotten an email from me. How about how? Okay, there. You can take the list. Lena, you made it. You made it. Yeah, by the skin of your chinny chin chin. Okay, so let me announce the first speaker. So each of them is going to talk about 15, 20 minutes about their journey. And then, Lexi will start. And then Xiaowan will go next. And then after that, we'll do Q&A. You should see me.
Amazing, thank you. Do you want me to sit or stand? Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah, and you can see right here.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right.
I'm going to turn this one off for now.
Yeah, that's great. Then it won't reverberate. Hi, everyone. I'm Lexi. I went to Berkeley, as do all of you. Go Bears. I want to talk a little bit today about just my journey into venture. Mostly want to leave a lot of room for questions and answer any that people may have about how to break into venture, what it's like once you're there, the types of things that we do on a day-to-day. What are some of the experiences that you may need, or some of the experiences that some investors are looking for to add somebody to their team? And as it relates, I am a woman, so I'll talk a little bit about what that means, being one of very few in our industry and one of very few in many of the industries that I've been in before being a venture capitalist. So a little bit on my background. I grew up both in Colorado and Hawaii. I had parents in both places. My dad is a professional kiteboarder. My mom was a professional skier. So on both sides, ended up getting to split time in both places. Had a pretty crazy childhood filled with lots of sports and lots of boys. I have 3 younger brothers, and we are very, very close. So I always grew up in kind of a male-dominated family, if that's what you will. But I think that that's kind of part of what makes me the way that I am today, and the way that I can interact with people of all genders, but also the way that I particularly get along in environments where I may be the only one. A little bit more on just kind of where I think my entrepreneurial sense of background came from. My mom is a custom home builder, started her own business, has run it her entire life. So I've always really had great female role models, and I think that's helped a lot in the entrepreneurship sense. And then my stepdad actually owns a World War I and World War II aviation museum. So grew up with the nonprofit side of my family as well, which you'll see has trickled back into my background in kind of some of the things I do on the side today. And also grew up flying. Oh, nice. So after growing up, I ended up going to Berkeley. It was the happy medium between Colorado and Hawaii. While I was here, studied business, also did the certificate in entrepreneurship and technology, got to know Gigi through that program, and was one of the first classes to come through and do the Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship and the Newton Lecture Series. So have been in your shoes. Probably not that long ago for me, but maybe for you. But that was kind of my background. And while I was here, I actually worked on a company that I started out of the Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship program. So it was a company called Acuity for Moms, helping moms and other veterans and folks that had been left out of the workplace to really find their way back. So we did custom online learning paths for moms, veterans, people with disabilities, people of color who really had taken either a gap to go and fulfill whatever need they had in their personal life, or to reskill and upskill to ultimately get into a position that they desired. So that was kind of what sparked the entrepreneurship within me. I take that founder mindset, I think, into work with me every single day, and I work with a lot of founders that come from these diverse backgrounds. I help a lot of our founders to try to bring some of these folks into their companies now. That was kind of my experience on the small startup side. I had also helped start a little company that was called Bugsnag. They ultimately ended up getting acquired, but I helped start their sales team while I was an undergrad and helped them all the way to the point of their acquisition. So that was kind of the beginning of my startup journey, and really where I learned that I like to work in really small companies. In the middle of all of that, I tried working at HP. Absolutely hated working in a big company, especially with a lot of people who had been there their entire careers and were 30, 40 years older than me. So I realized I'm not a big company person. I like to keep it small. I like to be able to do a lot. And that's kind of what led me to consider going into a role where it would allow me to do a little bit more of that. Next, I sold my soul and I did a little bit of investment banking. I think when you're in the business school here, it's pretty easy to get into kind of the tunnel vision of the ABCs, accounting, banking, consulting. I will say that when I was considering this position, what was really important to me is that I wanted a role that actually was going to matter in the things that I was learning. I wasn't going to do banking to be a career banker, even if that's what I said in interviews. I really wanted to try to learn how to be a CFO so I would never have to hire one. That was kind of the way that I looked at it. So I think that you can treat things like this as an actual boot camp rather than treating it as a career choice. And that's kind of a hot take, but I think a lot of people in my industry have gone into banking or consulting to try to get the basics down. And I think it's a really smart way to get started if you don't end up going the early stage operational route in a company. Some of the things that I learned, first and foremost, you will work your ass off. It is like the hardest job I think you'll ever have. And you'll do it for 2 years, but it'll feel like 5. And I think that this was a really good way for me to learn what it really means to do hard work. And I think it's something that you learn at Berkeley, but you don't really learn until you're in kind of that grinding environment outside in the real world with people who have expectations and your job is on the line. So I think this was kind of the biggest thing that I tell people I learned from it. You also learn a lot about presenting, public speaking, working with founders. If you're on the M&A side, you're going to be helping a founder at the pinnacle of their success or at the trough where they're selling, whether it's because they're selling in a good way or because they're doing a liquidation. You are kind of part of that journey and you get to meet founders in many different phases of their life cycle. You also get the basic understanding of capital raising. So I think it was really important for me to understand how cap tables work, understand what happens in the event of an exit. As a VC, of course, that's what we care about. So you need to understand what the actual mechanics are behind that. And then last, I think you learn a lot about different industries. So if you are a generalist and you go into banking, consulting, any of those, and decide that you want to be generalist by choice and essentially look at the world eyes wide open and look at a lot of different industries rather than siloing yourself early, you have the ability to really eliminate those that you don't like and focus more time on those that you do. After I did banking, I went over to the dark side and decided that I wanted to do more of the investing role, but I wanted to be able to maintain some of my growth investing background. So I worked my way over to G Squared, which actually has a lot of Cal interns. So I think that there's 1 or 2 of you that were supposed to be here. Who knows? But there's a lot of folks from Berkeley that I had met actually while I was working on Acuity, and they'd introduced me to the G Squared team. And I made my way over here a little bit over 3 years ago. I'm now a vice president focusing on consumer investments. I do some in our enterprise software as well. I spend a lot of my time really working with our individual LPs, as well as working with our portfolio companies, holding a couple of board seats for some of our more consumer technology-focused bets. And these are just kind of some of the companies that you may know. The way that we get involved, I think, is pretty different. We do both primaries and secondaries. For those of you that are coming to the dinner, I can walk you through what that actually means because it's a lot of nonsense, but it's a really good way to get into companies. But basically, it means that we buy shares in any way that we can. So we buy shares from the founders, we buy shares from early and stage employees, and we do the typical Series A, Series B, Series C round that you always hear about. All right, a little bit about the ecosystem today. Now that we're kind of in present day, this is where I'm at. Some of the things that we deal with on a daily basis is just the lack of diversity in venture capital. And you hear it all the time. There are less than actually 8% of all venture capitalists that are women, an even smaller percent that make it to partner. 78% of high growth private companies don't have a single woman on their board. Some of that comes down to the number of founders that come out of a female team, and also some of the fact is that we don't have a lot of senior level investors that happen to be women. The numbers get even worse when you look at it on a perspective of people of color. It's less than 0.1% of venture capital dollars that actually went into the industry went to female women of color, which is just deplorable. Like, to me, that is one of the worst statistics that I've heard, and it's actually declined since the pandemic. So while this is pretty daunting, I think what's important to note is that this has changed even over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, this was a boys' game, this was a white boys' game. And there was absolutely no room for people like me at the table and people like many of you in this room. And so I think that this is a world that is changing. Hopefully, you can help be part of it. Part of it comes from being founders. Part of it comes from supporting founders. Part of it comes from finding ways to be an investor, even if it's in a really small angel check, or finding a way to support somebody if you can't do it monetarily. But there's a lot of different things that are happening in the ecosystem that I think are pretty promising to help hopefully alleviate some of these statistics. Some of the things that I think I've been focusing on, and we can talk horror stories all day long of what it actually looks like to be in my shoes, but I think some of the things that I've really noticed have helped is to really think about lifting while you climb. So if you do make it into a position where you have the door open for you. It is your responsibility to put a wedge in it and hold the door open. That is kind of the way that I have been raised, and I think it's the way that many of us should operate in whatever you do, whether it's VC or something else. You should always think about ways that you can help bring others to the door, and ultimately offer them a seat at the table once they get there. So I think some of the ways that you can do that, I host a lot of founder and investor dinners. I host a lot of student events to help try to bring students into the ecosystem, whether it be just out of pure interest or helping them to introduce themselves to another co-founder or to just really brainstorm about what could be different in the world that we live in today. There's many communities for women that do want to explore VC or women that already are there. So there's a group called All Raise, which is actually how we met. And they support women investors. There's also a group called Women in VC that's really helpful. So there are groups like this for every type of venture capitalist. And if there isn't one, you can create one. So that's what I think I've learned, is that it's always important to cultivate community, to try to really open the conversation for people around you. And what I found is that once you do, it's actually better for not only the overall ecosystem, but also your deal flow. Like, we see a lot of deals that come from individuals that you meet at dinners like this, and you meet a lot of founders who are looking for investors that are exactly like you because you just happened to invite them. So I think that that's something that I found to be really important, is if the community is not there, create it. The last thing is just kind of generally, I want to talk a little bit about what it means to actually get into VC. So if you're interested in it, I think there's some things that you can do now to cultivate community while you're on campus. I spent a lot of time with folks like the House Fund, Skydeck, obviously Gigi and this program, but really just find ways to introduce yourself to founders or potential founders. That's something that I think you will never find a better, more concentrated environment than you have right here on campus. So try to introduce yourself to people, try to get to know folks. Many of the founders I'm investing in today, I knew while I was here. So I think that's an important kind of thing to take away, is your network is right next to you. So meet the people in this class, meet the people in all of your classes, take the bus sometimes and talk to strangers. Like, there are so many interesting people just on this campus alone. Next thing is just to try to stay up to date with what's going on in the market. So if there's a space that interests you, it does not hurt anyone to reach out to somebody who's an expert in that space on Twitter. Literally, so many deals come from me just randomly cold DMing somebody on Twitter, which is insane. That should not be a real way to actually get out there, but it is. Because all it takes is just you piquing somebody's interest and you getting a deal just by having the guts to send somebody a message. Also, I think finding ways to kind of build your network within VC, really important. Just introduce yourself to investors. If there are things like this, definitely go up and talk to them afterwards. Go up to people when they come onto campus. Try to set up those coffee chats if you can. And if you can't, at least follow along as they're posting a lot of content, because there are really great thought leaders out there. They're going to post a lot of the things that you're going to be interviewed on. So that's kind of my background. I'll leave lots of room for questions at the end, but that's, I think, all.
I mean, can you believe? I can't believe it, but 5 years ago, Lexi was in the boot camp club, and 5 years later, she's on stage presenting. So I'm really looking forward to this for some of you to be here in 5 years, or maybe less. Okay. Now I want to introduce the other female speaker, is Xiaowan, and she's with Iconic Capital, and she's going to share her background.
Hi, everyone. So unfortunately, I do not have visual aids that as comprehensive as Lexi's, but, just wanted to, share a little bit about my experience and background journey, and hopefully that it's somewhat helpful to you. So a little bit about me. I was born in China and grew up there, until I was maybe about 7 or 8, and moved to Wyoming, of all places, where there was very few Asian faces, and I was just a kid, didn't really know any English, so kind of was just dropped in a foreign environment and just forced to adapt. And you'll notice that this is one of the common themes for me growing up, is just changing environments and adapting. And I think a lot of that has translated into today, in terms of putting myself in different situations. Some of them might not be as comfortable or familiar, but always finding a way to leverage the resources around me to figure out a way. So, I lived in Wyoming for a couple of years, and then was actually, moved back to China to complete middle school. And, again, it's one of those transitions going from a very different education system into a test, academic oriented education system in China. And so I was there for a few years, and then made my way back to the US, and this time around in Lexington, Kentucky. So, you see there's a lot of differences in the culture, between the Midwest, the South, China, all of those. But somehow each of those experiences really shaped who I am as a person. And I am very grateful for having gone through all of those transitions. So when I finally had the chance to pick for myself, where I wanted to be after high school, I decided that it was California. I've always been fond of the state. When I visited Berkeley, I fell in love with the campus, the weather, the people, and most importantly, the food. So that was for me, kind of one of the key reasons why I came here. So after moving to Berkeley, I knew I wanted to, do something in business. I think growing up, I've always had fondness of entrepreneurship, but I didn't really know exactly how I wanted to manifest that in my career. Growing up, I would be selling, handmade jewelry and greeting cards around the neighborhood during holiday season, or setting up lemonade stands during the summer along the highway. But it's really just a small peddling here and there, and I didn't really have a systematic way of incorporating this passion into my career path. So I came to Berkeley wanting to explore, and that's exactly what I did. And I think one thing that's really helped me is just to notice what interests me and then just try it out. Whether it's in the form of an internship, a class, or a project, or even shadowing someone. Trying out all these different things to help me understand, what is it that I like, what is it that I don't like about a certain role, and let that shape my career path. So at Berkeley, I studied business. So I was at High School of Business, and then I also did a math minor on the side. So I've always been a fan of numbers, and combining that with my interest in business, I was like, okay, you know what, I am going to try finance. And kind of like what Lexi said, along with everyone else, kind of went down the path of pursuing that. But along the way, I tried a few different things. My freshman year summer, I interned at this company called Wish. Some of you might know it's the back in the days, it was more popular. You'll always see ads on Facebook at selling the most random things for $1 or $2, and shipping it to your door in a couple months. But I was I was there as one of the first business development hires. It was a team of maybe 5 or 6, so extremely small, entrepreneurial, and it was a really interesting experience working as part of a startup. Just kind of getting my hands dirty on the day-to-day operations. How to cold call a customer, how to manage conflicts with merchants, how to come up with solutions or find ways to further market the brand. So just having gone through that experience made me realize that, okay, yes, I do like startups, I do like technology, but I'm not sure if going straight into operation is something that I wanted to do out of college. I felt like there was a certain limitation to the impact that I could have made at one individual company versus perhaps going into investing or finance, where I could get exposure to a variety of business models, especially early on in my career. So leveraging that learning, I went on to hunt for my second choice, which was investment banking. So I tried out investment banking via a couple of in-semester internships, and just got a taste of what it really means to work in banking. It's not glamorous at all, especially in the early days. It's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of, PowerPoint and Excel, and just countless hours spent away on some of the least exciting tasks. But it was definitely a great stepping stone for me to get to the next place I wanted to be, which was investing. And so junior year of college, I interned at Goldman Sachs in New York City, and was fortunate enough to get a return offer and went back full time. Interestingly, the group I ended up with was financial institutions, so not technology related at all. I was working with some of the most legacy and archaic companies, across banks, insurance companies, credit card companies, mortgage originators. So, very unsexy stuff. But at the end of the day, it was a great training program, much like what Lexi described. It's kind of like a boot camp for you to develop all the skills you need for whatever career you wanted to pursue next. So for me, that meant, having the technical skills, having the soft skills like communication, like presenting, working together in a team, being able to manage upwards and downwards in terms of expectations and all of those different skills that I carry with me. But going into it, I definitely thought it was more of a means than an end. And ultimately, I did want to leverage that to enter investing side and preferably in venture capital. So that's exactly what I did. I, kind of went through a recruiting process while I was still in my banking job to see, what was out there. And Iconic, which is the firm that I am at now, came up because I heard really positive experiences from people who worked there, and thought it was a really unique value proposition, and ultimately ended up here. But just a little bit on the fund itself. So Iconic is a little bit unique compared to a lot of the other venture capital firms out there. We started out in the very early days as a family office. So what that meant was we had really strong relationships with a core group of individuals and helped them manage 100% of their wealth. So that's everything from their investment portfolios to their tax and estate planning to their philanthropic efforts and even personal advisory sometimes. And so from there, we grew over time to today a client base of over 400 individuals and families, among them, both founders and early employees at some of the most marquee tech companies, as well as the other half is from founders and operators of Fortune 2000 brands. So that's kind of the DNA. And from there, we kind of grew Iconic Growth, which is our dedicated technology venture investing platform. So, the cool thing is that the DNA allows us to get access to a very diverse and very powerful network from which we can draw from their capital, their time, their resources to support our investing efforts as well. And, at the end of the day, it's a kind of flywheel effect where the companies we invest in are not only generating financial returns for the LPs, but they're also, representing the cutting edge technology in each of the industries. And, we're able to introduce them to the LPs and help them generating revenue opportunity as well. So it's an interesting model. And over the past 10 years or so, we've been able to invest in over 120 companies, among them names like Datadog, Snowflake, GitLab, Procore, Adyen, Uber, Zoom, Airbnb, and so on. And, are able to follow those companies along their entire journey from as early as Series A and B all the way through pre-IPO and sometimes even beyond. So, I would say at Iconic, I feel fortunate compared to many other female VCs because it's an organization that really promotes diversity and empowers women. Within my team, we're actually half women. It's very rare to see in the venture capital industry, and I'm very grateful to be a part of that group. And it's not just across investors; it's also on the portfolio support side. It's across our leadership advisory, and all of these different functions within the firm. And everyone kind of works together as a team. So you're working with amazing women every single day. And for this past March, we also featured a lot of the women leaders in our firm, as well as women founders in our portfolio. So, there's very much a culture of promoting women and empowering us. However, that being said, I would say that this is still very much an anomaly and still an emerging trend. While there's a ton of women at the junior level, when you look above and see, who are the true check writers, who are the true decision makers, who's at the partnership level, that ratio comes down quite a bit. A lot of that just, one has to do with time, because the older generation, say 10, 20 years ago, it's truly a boys club, kind of like Lexi said. And there wasn't a ton of, upward mobility or a ton of opportunity for women. So today, while there's a ton of women investors at the junior level, we are kind of the next generation that's going to try to break that trend and really introduce more diversity and representation, even at the senior level, at the decision maker level. Overall, I would just say that venture capital is very much a relationships business. It's all about who who you like, which is unfortunate in a sense, because a lot of times people gravitate towards people who are of the same or similar background, whether it's your ethnicity, your age, your gender, your experiences, what school you went to, and all of those factors, they introduce some level of, affinity. And sometimes unintentionally, that introduces a lot of bias as well, which is perhaps why, a older kind of white male investor would connect better with someone who looks like him and perhaps thinks like him. And so a lot of it is just overcoming those differences and trying to look past, where you differ, but rather where you connect, where you're similar. So for me and a founder who perhaps is a lot older than me, it's a male, and it's completely different ethnicity than me. It's more about finding common ground, finding ways where we can relate and create that emotional connection and build that relationship so that we could be better partners down the road. And that kind of, I would just use that as a segue into perhaps my few pieces of advice for those wanting to enter the venture capital industry. First one is just, again, because it's a relationship business, it really matters how much you're able to cultivate your own relationships. And that starts now. It's much like what Lexi said, this campus is just full of brilliant people. And I've had so many conversations with founders, and I go to their LinkedIn, I see that they are a Berkeley grad, and a Go Bears really brings us closer. And I've had a lot of friends from my classes, from my student organizations who have also gone on to become investors or leaders at their respective firms, and we're able to leverage that relationship, to become partners down the road. So really invest in relationships, and it doesn't have to be in a very transactional way. In fact, I think the best relationship building is done when it's not meant to result in some sort of commercial relationship. It's when you are friends or when you genuinely like the person and like what they're building that you're able to ultimately have the best outcomes. The second one is the importance of having sales skills. And this may sound really counterintuitive, because a lot of the times you think, okay, a founder is pitching to the venture capitalist. But a lot of the times, especially in today's market, is the other way around too. There are, especially for the most promising companies, there's often rows of VCs lined up trying to hand them a check. But at the end of the day, it's all about conveying what you can bring to the partnership beyond just the money. And whether you do that in the form of consistently checking in over time, you do that in the form of making a very compelling pitch around what you can bring and what you're willing to offer, or just consistency and having genuine interest. I think all of those will ultimately contribute to success as a venture capitalist. One experience that I never thought would have any relation to what I'm doing now, but ended up being really helpful, is my experience at Wish. One of my job responsibilities was to cold email and cold calling. And back then I was like, I'm never going to be able to use this experience. It's not like I'm going to become I didn't really want to go into sales. But today, when I think about what I do in terms of reaching out to founders, trying to get in touch with the most interesting companies, trying to convince them to take a meeting, trying to convince them to take a check, a lot of those skills really come into play. So start exercising that, not saying that you should go call a bunch of people, but if there's someone that you want to make a connection with, someone you want to reach out for advice, or someone who you just genuinely want to get to know better, reach out. And whether it's cold email, connecting on LinkedIn, walking up to them, finding ways to really foster that relationship and take the initiative. And then, lastly, it's just about being compassionate and, having empathy and really connecting with people beyond just having a transactional relationship. I know this class is all about capitalism with compassion. I think just keeping that in mind, even as you enter some of these career paths where it feels like everything is very, kind of quantified in the sense of profit and numbers, really having that, human touch to it, recognizing that everyone you're talking to is a unique individual. And at the end of the day, having the intention to do good, and that kind of manifests into everything we do as well as an investor. Sometimes when I think about the companies that we invest in, it's really amazing what they've gone on to do, especially during COVID, during the pandemic, a time of massive change. One company that we invested in is called Chime, which is a challenger bank that some of you might know. They help serve a lot of the underbanked population. And during COVID, they helped, kind of expedite the process of people getting their COVID relief checks. And, the 1 or 2 days of getting the payment really made a difference for some of the most vulnerable population. Another company invested in GEM. They are in recruiting, and they focus on helping recruiters bring more diversity candidates and really ensuring that DE&I efforts are carried through beyond just a slogan. Things like that, where you can really maximize returns while doing good, and just keeping that in mind as you think about what you want to do, and as you think about what career paths that you might choose to go down. But yeah, that's just a little bit in terms of my background, my journey to VC. Definitely happy to answer any additional questions as well.
Thank you, Xiaowan. And I love your ending about how you can invest and be successful while doing good. So thank you. You guys move a little bit out. Yeah, perfect. Well, I'm going to ask the first 2 questions. All right? Am I allowed to do that? Okay. So you both talked in your careers about what you wanted to do, and you went out and got it, right? So you went out and you wanted to go into investment banking, or you wanted to go into investment, right? I think there was, I'm sure there was a whole bunch of bumps in the road, right? And especially maybe rejection. So can you share a story or 2 about a rejection and how you dealt with it?
There's a lot.
And we won't go into the private life stuff.
Yeah. I think the first really, really hard rejection was when we started to take Acuity beyond kind of the Berkeley ecosystem and actually went out and were going to raise seed funding or pre-seed funding from venture capitalists. We heard no literally hundreds of times before we got one of the fellowships that we did. So I think that it's humbling. It's about as humbling as like getting a B- on a test that you should have got a 98% on, but it's Berkeley. So I think that it's very similar feeling. Even though you go through it enough times, it still always stings a little bit. And then another time is actually when I wanted to do investment banking. I thought, okay, Goldman is the place to do it, so that at least it's a stamp on your resume. And I had one of those video virtual interviews, and someone came into my dorm room screaming drunk in the middle of my video interview. And I just started sobbing on the interview. And I was like, that's the worst rejection that's ever going to happen. So I think once you have something like that, that's pretty traumatizing, it works well.
So
You get over it.
wait. Did you get the offer from Goldman Sachs?
Absolutely not. Never heard back from Goldman Sachs again.
Xiaowan?
Yeah. Well, so my failure that I'll share is related to Goldman Sachs, in a different way. So back when I mentioned I got an internship, I mentioned I went to financial institutions group. What I didn't mention is that was not my first choice, not even my second choice. I did want to go to the tech group. It's everyone wanted to go to tech group. It's the most coveted, most glamorous. You're working with the most flashy companies. And the way that our process worked was you essentially get an offer for as a generalist. They fly you to New York where you network with all of the different group heads and people that represent each of the industry groups, and there's like a mutual selection process by which you're finally placed into a certain vertical. And I was interested in consumer, I was interested in tech. I wasn't really interested in financial institutions because it's kind of not a sexy industry to work in. It's known to be kind of a sweatshop. Work-life balance sucks. But you know what? I got placed into it. It was not my choice. I got rejected by my top 3 choices and had to just end up with FIG, and that's all I could do. I think my main takeaway is, again, when life throws you a curveball, you just make the most of it. Even though at FIG I wasn't able to gain the experience as I wanted in technology industry, I couldn't get that endorsement from having technology related experience to help me transition into VC. I didn't have all those things I had planned for. But what I did have was a very solid, technical foundation, because FIG is known to be, pretty rigorous when it comes to, modeling and financial analysis. I was well trained because the clients that we were working with were some of the most demanding and difficult, which, set a high bar for myself in terms of the quality of work I was producing. And at the end of the day, it's really about finding the positives in a, less than ideal situation, and being able to adapt to it and making the best of it, I guess. So that's my main learning from that experience.
Thank you. Okay. One last question that I'll open up to questions from the audience. So here's my question is, when I graduated from that other school, right? I was very interested in Silicon Valley, and I was going to these networking events. And I go to the events, and there was a VC who was also Asian. His name will not be revealed. And I go up. I thought he'd be happy to talk to me, this young, aspiring, recent grad from the school that will not be named. And he was just like, did not want to talk to me. It's just like, I felt like the feeling like, go away, little girl. You're nobody. Okay. And then years later, we were on a panel in Shanghai, and we were on the same panel, and he's like, oh, wow, why haven't I met you before? Like, when we get back to the Valley, let's have lunch. I'm like, you already rejected me. Okay, so I think a really hard skill is you say, go out, talk to people, go meet people, have coffee chats. But when you're young and you're not that confident, if someone wanted a coffee chat with you guys, I've gotten like emails from students like, oh, I can't make class, but I really want to have a coffee chat with them. What, you must get a lot of outreaches. What would appeal to you so that you would have a coffee chat? Because time is the most valuable thing. So like, what would you look at for someone trying to reach out to you so you don't do the swipe to the left?
I think there's do's and don'ts. I think for most people, at least in our industry, you've come to the realization, like you were saying, that it's relationship based. So if you're not nice, people are not going to give you deals, and founders are not going to like you. So it's a pretty quick feedback loop. So if you start now and like in your early years of VC, you don't, help the people below you, or you are, not realizing that you've also been treated that way. as an early stage VC, then you're going to end up in a place where you don't make it very far in this industry. So I think most people will be more receptive than you'd think, but you have to do the work beforehand. So I think a couple things that are just like bare minimums. Oftentimes people will copy and paste an email that has a different name. And like that is so easy to just double check or spell check. Font is different. Like things that are just like, it's very clear you're spray and praying this a bunch of different people. If I wouldn't do that to a founder, you shouldn't do it to me. Like I'm not going to go out and send the same email to 50 different founders. I'm going to try to make it as personal as I can because I know it's not going to get a response. I also think that it's okay to ask for help. So if you have something specific, include it in the email. Like sometimes people will reach out and they'll say, I saw that you guys invested in this company. I heard about this. I'm really curious to learn more about, what was the driver behind this part of the transaction? Or like, would this ever be a partner that you guys would consider or something like that, where it's like, wow, you actually did read the article and then you went one level deeper where you were like, okay, I actually know a little bit about this company or I've spent some time thinking about it. That goes for interviews too. By the time you get to the coffee chat, if we get to the end of the conversation and, we've kind of been going back and forth and you don't have any questions, it's kind of like, well, why did we hop on the phone? Like, I felt like there was something here that you wanted to get out of it. Have a question. Like if there's something really interesting that you wanted to learn about, or if there's something specific or reason why you're reaching out, make sure that it's known. Because I think I get on the phone too often with people who have no idea why they actually wanted to have a call. And it's kind of like, okay, I'm happy to help, but if you don't give me away, then I can't.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really agree with all of those advice that Lexi shared. I think one other thing I would note is just on the topic of getting personal and having a very targeted outreach and not doing like a generic copy and paste. It's quite fascinating what you can find out about people just based on searching them up online. Whether it's looking at their LinkedIn, looking at their past experiences mentioned, like whatever it is. Somehow make it personal and create an emotional connection. So for example, for me, while I was at Berkeley, I was very involved in the Berkeley dance community. I joined a bunch of dance teams, and one time I got an outreach from a Berkeley student who actually referenced one of the that she was also part of the dance community, and she was like, "Oh, I saw on your LinkedIn that you were part of this group." And for me, that was instantly like, "Wow, it shows that you've done your research for one, and you really care." And that you care about me as a human being who is more than just my job title, So that really makes a difference. And on a similar note, it's really just showing the other person that you care, that you care about respecting their time, that you care about just having genuine interest and come prepared with questions. Sometimes I get outreaches saying, "Hey, I just want 15 minutes of your time." And for me, it's like, okay, I am more likely to respond to that because even if we get on the phone and it ends up being a longer conversation, like for me, it just seems like a smaller ask. So if you start with a smaller ask, whether it's in the length of time or like a yes or no, like it's very easy to get a response versus like, demanding something bigger or, oh, can you like review this for me? Can you give me advice on my resume? Or, can you get on the phone with me for 30 to 45 minutes? Like make it easy for them to say yes. And then, lastly is really just about the details and don't have things like, hi, comma, blah, 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 and it makes it very obvious that you don't really care who you're reaching out to as long as you get a response. And, again, spell checks, it's very important. Attach your resume, and reference something on it for people to look at, to get invested in you. If possible, reference something you have in common, whether it's a school you went to or a common hobby, interest, or even just mentioning a piece of news or a tech trend that you find interesting, something that makes you stand out, and one that really jumps off the page versus just like a generic email that I just read and pass. So.
Also, I think the biggest no-no that people do is they blast to everyone at the same company.
Gosh, yeah, that.
And we all talk about it. It's like our lunch conversation for the day. So don't do that. Yeah. It's really, really obvious, and it makes just a bad taste no matter what you put in the email.
Yeah. You mean like asking everyone in the same dorm out at the same time? All right. Actually, Xiaowan, I have something in common with you. When I first came to the US, I went to North Dakota.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, we can share some stories.
Yes.
All right, let's get some questions. Okay, who has a question? All right, right there, and please stand up and talk loud.
Looking at all the entrepreneurs that have worked with and investing in several startups, what do you believe are the most important qualities of an entrepreneur? And my second question is, if you have to give an advice to early stage startups, what are the advice for people trying to build their business?
I could start. Yeah. So in terms of characteristics of a good entrepreneur, I think number one is just motivated and being, relentlessly product focused. I think there are some founders that are chasing the clout, so they're, doing it for the glamour of, being in Silicon Valley, of starting a company, of getting all these inbounds for VCs. But if you're really focused on the problem that you're trying to solve, the product that you're trying to build, it comes through. It comes through in the way you talk about it. It comes through in the way that you are communicating the pitch, the way that you build a company, the way that you assemble your team. Like it all comes through to us as investors. So just that's number one. And then I think two is being a great communicator. A lot of times,
During their attendance, that's why.
I'll let you do our attendance and then I'll keep talking. I was like, what is ruffling?
Yeah,
And that's helpful. No more eye clickers.
Oh, no.
Look how many selfies we're in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything else on that?
I'll just wrap up.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, Xiaowan's going to finish about what she's looking for in a first-time investor.
Oh yeah. So just to wrap that up, and it also kind of ties into your second question in terms of advice. It's being adaptable. Most of the time, for an early stage company, your first idea isn't going to be your final product. It's a lot of pivoting along the way. Testing it out, getting customer feedback, and then adjusting accordingly. So being flexible and steering your company in the direction that the market is telling you to, that investors and mentors are telling you to, and being able to make those changes, it's very important. Yeah.
And then I think two of our biggest rules are no BS. I hate when I get on a call with somebody and they just tell me the good things. I really want to know about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because otherwise I can't be helpful. So when I get on, especially with an early stage founders, both of us actually work more on the growth side, but we do, or at least I do angel investing on the side. So we work with a lot of earlier stage founders, and I think the biggest thing that you find is that they always feel like they have to tell you what you want to hear, but it would actually be a lot more helpful to both you and me if you're able to basically tell me what is going right, and then tell me what are you going to need to cross as a threshold to actually get to the next phase that is causing you grief right now. Like, what is going to be the sticking point that this round of funding or this advice from an investor can help with? That's something that people are always really shy to do. And then I think culture creators is another incredibly important part of being an early stage founder versus more of a growth stage founder. Growth stage founders need to have what it takes to go public. Early stage founders need to have what it takes to keep it together. So I think an early stage founder needs to know how to really, really cultivate culture. So they're hyper focused about who they're hiring. I always ask an early stage founder who the first person they fired was, because it helps you to learn whether or not they can basically shit or get off the pot. Like, they have to be able to fire people, and they have to be able to make hard decisions early and often. So I think that that's something that I always ask about. And then lastly is just to be eternally positive. Even if there are bad things going on, you have to be the visionary leader. Even if you are the product person, even if you don't come from a business background, even if you are not the most happy-go-lucky type of person, you have to present that way to your employees and to investors sometimes. So I think just reading the room and having the ability to do that is a really important skill. And that's something that I think you can kind of work on here that'll take you to the next level as a founder.
When you're talking back there, and I'm sitting there, I can hear and there's also some students in this classroom who have hearing disabilities, and it's really hard for them when we talk. So even to whisper, that's acceptable. So we be compassionate. So both of you have very traditional business backgrounds going into VC. What advice or what advice do you have for people who are coming from like a science or engineering background who wants to break into that space?
That's a really great question. And I actually think that coming from a non-business background gives you a lot of competitive edge in venture capital because you think differently from the other finance-oriented investors and you think similarly with the founders. You are better able to understand what they're building. You're able to dive deeper into the technology and the product. So I would say my advice is more so just, even though you're not majoring in business, taking classes like these and taking initiative to develop those kind of soft skills on the side, on your own time, whether it's in the form of joining student organizations, whether it's in the form of coffee chatting people, and kind of working those muscles so that you have both the technical background as well as those more qualitative skills. And as you enter into post-grad kind of career opportunities, you don't have to start in finance or VC. You can work at a tech company or a startup, get some operating experience, and a lot of early stage funds actually value that a lot. They think that having gone through the motions yourself, you're better able to tell the good apart from the bad when you're looking at businesses. So view it as a strength rather than a limitation, and definitely kind of leverage that.
Yeah, I echo that. I'm actually the only person on my team who is not of that background. And I think you'll find that the bias comes from the fact that we are on the growth side. So most of the time you need the financial background to be able to do the type of modeling that we do for every deal. But at the early stage, technology is the most important part. So you will spend hours and hours on diligencing just the product itself. Versus ours, if it's been working and you can get to 100 million of revenue, the product itself is pretty vetted. So early stage, and especially the earliest of stages where they don't even have a product, they just have an MVP or they have, a mock-up of a product that will eventually, hopefully come into fruition, you need that technical background. So I think a lot of these funds are looking for that type of talent specifically. And there's also other ways to get involved. So there's firms like Signal Fire or Link that end up actually using technology to source. And so you can kind of take a hybrid engineering, data science, and investor role. And that can be really interesting as they kind of build an algorithm to source the types of companies that they're going after. So there's hybrid roles as well. And then you can be really involved in companies. Like one of my friends in the space is somebody who comes from a mechanical engineering background. And she spends one day of every single week working with a single portfolio company in the weeds on product and loves it. That's like her favorite part of her job. And she gets to work with other companies throughout the week. So you can find ways to incorporate it if you're worried about not having the hands-on experience too. Because I get that people who come from that background don't necessarily want to not do engineering. They just want to also be an investor.
Thank you. I have a request. Is Amy's going to go up to the Satarja Center to receive the pizza? Is there someone who's going to be at dinner that can walk with her? Okay, Lena. Okay, perfect. If you can go with Amy, because the pizza, I'm a little bit worried that if we don't go there, they won't leave the pizza. They'll take the pizza home. All right. Wait, you guys, we're not done. Let's take another question. And if you haven't taken the picture with the selfie, do it, because I'm going to take it down. So, any more questions? Especially with the women. Here's a chance
I mean, gender is an obvious one, but it materializes in really, really weird ways. I think like I can think of way too many times where I'm the lead on a deal and I send an email to a founder and loop in my analyst who happens to be male, and they respond to me as if I'm the EA. And then it's really, really awkward when I get on the phone with the founder and I have to tell them that I'm the person who's leading the deal. Like that happens all the time. So I think just like getting over the awkwardness that comes with it is definitely a pushback. Age is another one. I think there's it's pretty clear, but there's a massive age gap in terms of leadership, both of companies and of firms, and those that are actually doing the check writing or at least all the phases up into it. So sometimes you'll get, bias against it or pushback, like people will get on the phone with you and say, oh, are you a member of your investment committee, which is the voting body that decides whether or not a deal gets done. And usually, we are equally as important, if not more important than a partner being in that call, because you're not going to get the time of day from a partner. But if we veto a deal, it's done. So that's kind of something that I think is a pushback that is easily avoidable because that company is blacklisted if they treat you poorly. So that's kind of like the way that you get around some of those.
Yeah, I think credibility is definitely a big thing, especially early on in your career. And, when you look young and you don't look like the typical VC, some founders will, question if it's worth spending their time with you because maybe you're not the decision maker. Maybe they won't get anything out of building a relationship with you versus like, building a relationship with like someone who's like older and male. Sometimes I would get on the call and they'll be like, oh, is there anyone else joining? Or if I try to initiate discussions with the founder, they'll be like, I'd like a partner involved in this conversation. And so a lot of those times it's really just making your presence and making your importance known. I am a part of a deal team of 2, like, it's me and a partner or 3. And, I am kind of your internal champion within the broader Iconic Capital. If I don't champion for you, you're not even going to get a chance of being considered by the product partnership. So, just being, just asserting your presence when needed, I think that's a big one. And outside of credibility, I think another one that's challenging is just learning about new industries and technologies and products as soon as possible. I can't understand everything. Like, I don't completely understand each company that I'm looking at, but I have to learn. I have to learn what they're building, what problem they're solving, what is kind of the underlying technical differentiation. And a lot of that learning is compressed into very short time frames. For example, if I'm looking at a healthcare IT company, I don't have any healthcare background. I don't even have any bio background. I know very little about the existing kind of legacy processes and the ongoing challenges that they're experiencing. So it's really committing yourself to learning as quickly as possible and getting up to speed on the business and market. I think that's another key challenge. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think there's a bunch of you who probably want to come up and talk to them and make yourself known and network. So I will bring this class to a close. But one thing I want to point out, especially Athena, your last question about credibility, is if you don't have that, if you don't get the benefit of that instant credibility because you're 6'4" and like you sound like this, right? You just honestly have to provide value. Figure out a way to provide value to whoever you're trying to talk to until they realize that you have value. And that's when you get your credibility, is when they realize that you're really a valuable person to know.
Yeah, Gigi, on that, with founders, with other people that you connect with, always offer, like even when I pass on a company, even when I don't end up hiring someone, I always offer a way to be helpful. And I think that that's something you can carry with you, whether you're a VC or in any role, and it will always go farther to be the node in the network than to just be somebody that benefits from it. So I think that's really, really salient advice. You should take that to heart.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and I would echo that. Like, if you're reaching out to a VC or someone to connect with, you could offer them something in return. Maybe you don't have a deal flow, but you could be like, hey, I know my friend who's building a really cool startup, or I know my friend who's working at a campus incubator that could potentially be a great resource for you. Offer something so that they're incentivized to take that call.
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, thank you for all these valuable insights. And who wants to come and speak in Newton Series 3 years from now? Yes. Okay, so thank you.